right now?
Well, the really most exciting one is actually when we provided essentially a product development team and helped a client who is not a digital client create their first digital offering. And it took us about 14 months. And now it is actually beginning to gain traction. They've signed up a bunch of customers and they're very excited and looking forward to us helping with some similar projects. So it's pretty gratifying to help someone transform themselves.
That's awesome. Are you able to mention what field of
Yeah,
service they're in?
it's healthcare. So it's a healthcare well-known brand, but not well known in the digital space.
Yeah. Most successful brands, most aren't.
Right.
I will say that. I'm not saying there aren't successful digital companies. Obviously, some of the world's best are digital companies, but it's often amazing how many digital people think there's no world outside of the online space, even though they live in it.
It's true. You get wrapped up in your own world, and I know the feeling. So but it's wonderful to explore and see some of these other companies that the technology isn't in their vocabulary. So they
Right.
don't really know how to talk to people, how to engage with people with technology, and frankly, even how to use technology. So it's been a great experience, and we're grateful for the client, and they're happy, and so are we, which is what you want.
That's awesome. Yeah, product development, transitioning online can be a scary path. So that's really neat that they have enjoyed the process and understood that it takes a timeline to pull something like that off. I'm sure it took some leadership to get done. Let's dive into resources. So what 3 books or resources do you recommend for other visionaries out there?
It's an important question. So I've been thinking about that because I get this question occasionally, and I'm going to give you 3 books, and one of which I just finished. So I'll kind of go back and forth in terms of more current and ones that are a little more, let's just say classics, I guess. So I'll
Yeah.
start with a book called Emotional Intelligence. There's a current version of it called EQ 2.0 by Daniel Goleman. And that book to me is one of the most important books in my career. It starts off with a discussion about how a couple of different people had to close large offices of companies and fly out to a location and tell the people there. And it really explains how you can do that well, which is an awful situation to be in for those people, and how you
Yes.
can do it poorly. And the contrast is remarkable. And so I felt like that book early in my career was really important to teaching me how to be essentially in the bad news business as a manager
Yes.
of people without creating the kind of angst and anger at management that often happens when you don't do it well.
Right.
So that was
Are you
that was
saying there's going to be bad news in life on
well,
occasion?
it's funny. I try to think of all the times when I've gotten to deliver good news as a manager, and really, it's primarily around promotions and things of that nature. But more often than not, unfortunately, it's having to say, "Hey, we're not doing as well as we could," or "Look, this is something we need to look at." And it's how you message it, it's how you follow through, it's how you talk to people. It was really a great book to help me, frankly, and not just at work, but in my personal life too. So I feel
I got
very
to get
grateful.
it. That's a big one. I
Yeah,
mean, we as human beings, we have to learn how to say happy birthday appropriately to people, like we've got to learn how to put energy into the good.
it's right.
Therefore, we also but if that's hard for us, then how much harder is it to learn how to deliver the bad news
You're,
in a
you're
great way?
exactly right.
That
You're
book
exactly
sounds
right. And
amazing.
exactly. You're trying to remember the things about people that you know make them who they are. And that way, when you're talking with them, you don't obviously introduce a lot of personal information in the workplace, but even just little things like, oh, remember somebody said that one of their daughters was trying to travel to a certain country and did that. And I, just kind of bring them, hey, how did that trip go? And you don't have to make it a big conversation, but it's really interesting. The
Good
book
to
is
know.
a fabulous read. And Daniel Goleman is clearly a superstar in that area.
That's amazing.
So,
What are
yeah.
your other two? Sorry, I made you go
No,
long
no,
on that
no
one.
problem. The other two, the second one is a book that I just finished. It's called Quiet: The Power of Introverts in a World That Can't Stop Talking. And what's fascinating about it's written by Susan Cain. what's fascinating about this book is being an introvert myself, but being coached out of it, like many people have been over the years, was interesting looking at the history of how we got here. So I'll just give you one little fact. The premise of the book is introverts have tremendous capabilities, especially working alone, but even in teams in an interesting way. So one of the interesting facts in the book was all the presidents, with a few exceptions, before the 1900 in the United States were introverts. And all the presidents after 1900 in the United States, most of them were extroverts. And the reason for that goes back to the introduction of the Dale Carnegie speaking tour that started around 1905. So Teddy Roosevelt was the first real extrovert that started the process. There you go. All right.
This is an
Perfect.
OG
Yeah.
lead magnet right here. This is
Yeah.
circa 1936.
There you go. There
Yep.
you go. So it's a fascinating book. A lot of interesting data. There are stories that I just love in there, and I'm really happy I read that one. So that's a good one. The one that is probably the most impactful of any book I have ever read as a person who is in business is called First Break All the Rules: What the World's Greatest Managers Do. And that book is written by Marcus Buckingham. And in fact, Adobe's first management training courses some years ago were based on that book. And the premise is we spend a lot of time trying to make ourselves and our companies the kind of people and places where if we're not doing something well, we focus on how do we do that better. When in fact, after talking to 80,000 managers before writing this book, Marcus Buckingham learned that we should be focusing on the things we do well and strengthening those because we're good at those. And those strengths, both as companies and individuals, really make us much better at what we do generally than if we focused on trying to do something we'll never be good at or we'll only get marginally better at. Doesn't mean you should give up, but you just shouldn't be you shouldn't be in a situation where you're spending all your energy trying to make yourself something you're not. I guess that's the best way to describe it.
I love that. That's huge. So two things I gather from that. One, I'm a big fan of the book Strengths Finder 2.0, which is built upon the backbone of that book, I'm sure. And I'm sure they studied that as they were creating it. And it did change my life when I learned that. And two, on the flip side for you visionaries listening in, the irony for First Class Business, when I finally got the right design team, but also that came from finally learning how to lead, right, and be a better leader to my teammates. One of our greatest strengths and assets is our design and production capabilities. I have zero skill in either of those facets, but the team does. That's what they're great at. So as a visionary versus a manager, it is worth considering, do you have the ability to lead and guide people, who are great at what they do, and can you stay out of the way of their ability to perform on that? Because I call our design department the heart and soul of our business. I've seen it in the reaction of clients, and I'm like, man, this copy is amazing. I'm like, and people look at the page, they're like, how many pages is it? And I'm like, oh, that sucks. Like, nobody gets excited about copy. Nobody gets excited about a bridge that's being built long term because you have to wait to see if the bridge works. But design, like with a right designer, oh my gosh, our clients and team members are like, that's amazing. And I'm like, cool, that's
great.
So
that's a great story.
I got a question for you.
Sure.
So emotional intelligence, Daniel Goleman, and then yes, I do see Emotional Intelligence 2.0, but I see Travis Bradbury and Gene Greaves. Are those different books?
They are. The more current one, Marcus Buckingham, I believe, wrote the first one. I might have gotten help, but he was the primary author.
You said Marcus for First Break All the Rules, right?
Yes, First Break All the Rules. What the great
Daniel Goleman for Emotional Intelligence, right?
Correct.
Okay. And so get the first one and the second one. Is that correct?
Yes, I would suggest that. Yep.
Very
both
good.
Of which are excellent. I mean, in both cases, they're just, these are sort of tried and true ways of working and believing and if suddenly human beings turned into some other animal, we might be different, but we're
Yeah.
sort of the same as we have been for a long time. So that's what those books
Right.
rely on.
We can count on that. You can
Yeah.
count on us being right back as well, Vision Pros. We'll be back after the intro. We'll dive right into David Hershfield's vision for how he serves his audience. All right, welcome in to Vision Pros Live with Jackson Callum. I'm your show host. We will be doing interviews for visionary entrepreneurs and guest leaders who are building fantastic visions out there. Hey, what's up? And welcome into another episode of Vision Pros Live. I'm your show host, Jackson Callum, founder and CEO of First Class Business. We've got some excellent resources to put out there. I will say that David blew my mind with 3 books, one that I've heard of, 2 that I've never heard of. And considering I've asked over 200 guests what resources they recommend to visionaries out there, that's a huge treat. These plus the way he quantified it. I'm just excited to dive in and talk about his vision. But I am going to give a few more resources first. 2 of them come in the form of sponsorships. One of them comes in the form of giving back. And we'll see what else I come up with and beyond that. Well, one other caveat. David and I are going to be talking about maximizing worldwide expertise at a fraction of the cost. Right? This is about doing fractional work the right way. This is about making sure that also you don't fracture a company as you work with fractionals. I see that happen far too often. There's so much discord. There's not enough harmony amongst teams and departments. I'll get off my soapbox. Dave and I will talk about it a little bit in just a minute. But in terms of sponsors, Melissa Gray from the Law Spot, one of these sponsors, that's her. She is a client of ours. Recovery Unplugged is not, but both are entities that are doing amazing things. Melissa came onto this show. I highly recommend checking her episode out. And I've been searching for a lawyer that has a heart and a soul for a long time. No offense to the lawyers who also have hearts and souls, but I've found that in the business world, you get condescended at. You don't get instructed in a way that you can understand it. We went through a $20,000 trademark battle at Restaurant Connect. I've been in situations where we've had to write demand letters, where we've had chargebacks, where we've had Apple patent our software. That was, again, at Restaurant Connect. They literally patented our software. And when you have a legal source on retainer that you trust, you tend to make better decisions than when you need one at the last minute. You haven't thought through it. So my observation as somebody who's been through that type of a battle many times over the years is, why not be a wise steward and get ahead of the curve? Find somebody that you might mesh well with and see who your options are rather than being stuck in a desperate situation. So I hope that helps you. I hope you never need it, by the way. That would be the other thing I would, of course, wish for your business. Then there's Recovery Unplugged with Andrew Sosin. Andrew Sosin also came on this show, and I was super impressed with him as a leader. He's been to the Tony Robbins event 22 times in a row. So if you're not a Tony Robbins fan, you might not care much for Andrew. If you are a Tony Robbins fan, the dedication he has to helping people with healing and taking people to the next level is second to none. In addition, Recovery Unplugged is all about helping people overcome addictions that they're facing. That could be drugs and alcohol, of course, but some of us out here in the world have also gone through addictions of things like apps or Netflix or YouTube and binge watching series and stuff. Too many people out there want to escape their own life. Now, again, if you're in that situation where that's hard, I'm not a therapist. I highly recommend calling their 24/7 hotline to figure out if you need help. Now, the other thing that's cool about this is some of us just have friends or family members that suffer with addictions, and it's helpful to be able to call a hotline like this and ask for help for how do you intervene successfully? How do you do so where you cushion the blow and where you don't perhaps receive backlash and become collateral damage yourself in the process. I speak about that super reverently and sacred from a position of knowing what that's like many times in my life. Not only for myself, but also going through that with family members in certain aspects. Feel free to ask me offline about any of that. I'm a pretty open book. And I do know that our stories are often what inspire people to effect great change in their lives. They have over 400 employees. They are in several different states. More importantly, with COVID, they were pressured to go to an online model. So now they're available worldwide. And Andrew Sosin is just a phenomenal leader. He just did a mastermind recently on Richard Branson's Island with him and Robert Kiyosaki from Rich Dad Poor Dad. So, I some people would say, oh man, this guy likes to name drop. I do. I do like to name drop. I like to know who people are associated with and who they revere and respect, and who they look up to as mentors, who they want to associate, because it teaches me the principles. I can see shared principles across the board and say, yeah, that's the type of environment, the type of person I want to be building my life with too. So without further ado, we're going to dive into the water project. The water project is really, it's a primary focus I have on this show. Is I want to give back to the 8 billion people who need a lot of help. One of the best ways I can do that, besides trying to exhaust my own resources, is also trying to make sure that I'm a microphone for those who haven't heard of situations and things like this. There are millions of people who don't have access to clean drinking water. I can go downstairs in a heartbeat and get clean drinking water. So I feel like all of us who have a microphone, if we want to really maximize our life and opportunities in the world, then we can also look at our opportunity to give back. What the Water Project does allows you to select a specific community you want to help. You can donate however much money you want to. And what's really cool is they'll keep you updated with the project status and what they're doing. You get to see it come to fruition, where your dollar goes and how it's spent. I think that's super awesome. And if you're not in a position to give back because COVID hit hard, the economy is down, and things are just really tough on you and your family, then I'd ask for two things. One, I'd ask that you share this with others, because you never know who in your network might be the person who helps people get access to water. And two, I'll pray for you. Three, in addition to that, if you have another cause that you'd like us to support, maybe you've got a family member who's got a crowdfunding project, don't hesitate to drop that in the comments. Give us a chance to see if there's an opportunity for us to serve you as well. And I'll be happy to dive in and see how we can help make that happen. So without further ado, David Hershfield, thank you for joining me on Vision Pros Live. Let's dive right in.
Sounds great.
Awesome, man. Well, we're going to dive in with the most pointed question for the audience. What's your vision for those that you serve?
Well, it actually goes back to one of the books I mentioned. It's about focus on what's most important to you. And as an example, that focus is only as good as you can make it if you know how to take the distractions out of your way. So at a micro level, we know what that's like. We get distracted all day long, right? How do we focus on the things that matter the most? At a company level, or in people who we work with, our clients, it's really the same thing. You're not a digital company, but you need to do digital work. How do you focus on the healthcare example? How do you focus on the real thing that you do? And why don't you cede that other work to someone who's an expert so you don't have to worry about it? And we have this happen with information security. We have it with product development, all kinds of things. And that vision of focus, I think, it's harder and harder every day now for people to focus. It just is. And for companies to focus. So,
Right.
Yeah. And that's how we help our clients get them to focus.
That's really neat. So it's almost, I don't want to call it a narrowing of the vision, because focus isn't about narrowing. It's not about putting blinders on per se, but knowing that where you're looking and where you're going should align. The better we align those, the easier it is to make sure that, we're not running into walls, tripping over rocks, running into challenges. And you mentioned something cool. I call it the digital identity. Not that I'm the only one who calls it that, but the digital identity is so easy to create these days.
Yes.
Right. You can create ugly babies really fast online that are not even close to a representation of who you are.
Right.
But worse yet, you can fabricate a very nasty facade, a very difficult to see through facade, and continually deceive, decept, and next thing you know, people aren't happy with what you're doing, how you've done things. You might create a much, much greater problem for your life long term by going about that the way that I see so many people in the market profess it. So I'm grateful that you talked about working with somebody who gets it. And I've heard from your stories already, as well as our pre-show, how much you really get that. We're going to put a pin in that and come back to it. We're going to talk about the fraction, how you do that at a fraction of the cost, how we work with people worldwide. First, I want to know, what's your personal vision?
Well, it's interesting. I've worked on this for a long time. This goes back to, how do you know who you really are and what really gets you excited? My vision is very simply summarized in this phrase: I love helping people learn how to help themselves. That's basically what I do. And I do that in my personal life too. In fact, my youngest daughter told me not too long ago, she was talking to someone about having shown her how to do something. She's a sophomore in college. And her friend said, well, that's how one way your dad expresses love is by showing you how to do something so that you can do it yourself. And that's infused in everything, business, personal, all of it. It
Yes.
just gives me a lot of joy to see someone do something that they couldn't have done before, or perhaps they didn't know how to do it, or perhaps they were scared or not confident. And when I'm able to contribute to that somehow, that leap, um, that vision of getting to a place where you haven't been before is really something important to me.
I love that. I'm going to build on that because
Okay.
visionary is listening in. If you haven't ever felt that before, that ability to teach somebody to do something and then watch them do it, like that is a level of happiness, a level of joy, a level of peace, and like confidence. So it's self-assuring too of your own value. There's so much value you can get out of helping people. Now, if you have felt that and you want more of that, one of my secrets for that is to stop saying that things are common sense. It's one of the
Yes.
greatest things that you can do is to learn that the curse of knowledge tells us what we know is something everybody knows. What we've learned is something everybody else already knows, and that's not true. So when we say like obviously it works this way, or well that's common sense, we're robbing people of the opportunity to learn what we have learned through years of experience that we may take for granted. So that's one trick I would give to people who want to experience that same thing. And I hope you do, because again, there's tremendous joy and happiness in that.
Great advice, Jackson. And you're right. I can't think of too many things, at least in my life, that give me as much joy as helping others do something.
Mm,
It
no way,
just
man.
really is great. Yep.
Yeah, I would agree. There's nothing out there for me
Yeah.
beyond that does that level of like, whoo, it's
Yeah.
life. Let's live. All right, diving into the exact opposite. Let's dive into a super dark subject. So on the dark side, um, what is the worst leadership experience you've ever had?
Well, it was early in my career, I'm happy to say. So it's a bit of a faint memory at the moment. But the good news is that I learned a lot from it. So my worst leadership experience was when I watched a colleague. We were both mid-level managers in a large company. Basically take on a conversation in a large forum, essentially like a town hall forum. My team and his team and a couple of other teams had participated in building a really terrific product and had some ideas about how that was done. And this particular person had a habit of basically saying that it was all him and his team. And this happened in front of my team. And I was just absolutely challenged with, what do I do? We're here in front of, close to 1,000 people worldwide, meetings being streamed all over. Do I say something? Do I just go along with it? How do I deal with it now and after? And it's one of those dilemmas where I didn't have anything to base it on. I'd never experienced anything like that before in my career. So I couldn't draw from anything that was even close to that. And I opted to say nothing at that time and in front of everybody. And I could just see the deflated look on the members of my team. And so I went back to my office and I thought about it a little bit. And the next day, I slept on it. The next day, after talking with a few people I trusted, I confronted this person privately and I explained the fact that this wasn't the right thing to do, and that I had actually failed as a leader by not standing up for my team in a way that could have been professional. Um, and so it was one of those moments where you realize that if you don't do certain things in the moment, you lose the opportunity to get things right. And I
Mm,
didn't need to humiliate him or do anything like that, but I could have done something that I just didn't do. And that
wow.
was tough. That was tough. So,
I had the opposite effect. I was a person. I'm a healer. Like
okay.
principally, I'm a healer, but I'm also a protector.
Mhm.
And I grew up with a lot of mama bears. And
Nice.
so I know how to torch somebody to the worst degree possible. And it's a skill set and a weapon that should be used with extreme caution and care. I did not
Absolutely.
know how to use extreme caution and care on that in my day. Um,
Wow.
so I was a Lifetime Fitness, and my boss, he won. I destroyed the Lifetime Fitness sales team that I was on,
Oh,
like in a matter of a week.
hard.
And my boss had locked us in the club on December 31st, because we were the first club close to hitting goal since the club had opened.
Okay.
And so I had to turn my keys in. I walked across the street in the rain to a bar and held up, like a duffel bag, and was like,
Oh,
"Who
wow.
wants a gym membership? I want to go home."
Wow.
We broke the records for calls that day. Me and Cody both, 200 plus calls in the day trying to get it done. And instead of handling that whole situation the right way, I was done, and I started to burn bridges between my manager, and the team a little bit. And that wasn't the goal. That wasn't the intent.
Yeah.
But that's part of why it's so important to read books like EQ2.
Yeah.
That's why it's so important to learn, like, if you want to foster relationships and cultivate long-term growth and success, there's shifts you can make. I ran into Wally years later, my boss, and I let him know what an amazing manager he was and how awesome things were, and completely shocked him, and blew his mind on that. But I
Wow.
could sense there was still a little bit of hurt from what happened,
Sure.
and when we learn from leaders like David how to not do that, there's alternative paths to going about this. You don't have to walk away from the fight, and you also don't have to crush the enemy.
Yeah.
um, that's where visionaries need to be playing in order
Yeah.
to really build their visions out with their teams.
That's
So
great.
let's
That's a
dive
great
into
story.
the
Appreciate you
best.
sharing that.
Oh yeah, of course. Well, you sparked the memory. I was like, man, I've never talked about this before. Not from this angle. So what is your best leadership experience look like?
Well, actually, in this case, I can actually tell the company. I can tell you what happened, and I can tell you what was so gratifying about it. So it was PayPal, 2000. I'm going to say like 2009 or 10. So what happened at PayPal then was, there was the horrible financial crisis that resulted in a bunch of layoffs in 2008 across all industries, and it sort of bled over into 2009. And then as a result of that, what started to happen as things started to pick up over the course of a year or two is that PayPal was losing a lot of people to competitors. So people were job hopping and teams were just getting decimated. And my boss basically challenged me and said, I need you to come up with some type of retention goal. And I'm like, well, what are you talking about? And so I did a lot of research, talked to some people I trusted, had a good group of people who, I could ask about it. And I learned that actually people who manage others have a substantial amount of control in making sure that people don't leave. And I couldn't believe it. I was literally like, really? I thought people left for, reasons that were beyond a manager's control. Turns out the number one reason people leave companies is because it's been like this for 30 years is because they hated their boss. And or they weren't given an opportunity or weren't appreciated for the work that they did. Money and other things are down the list. Those are important, but for the most part, people cannot tolerate working for somebody they can't really respect. So what did I do? I came up with a goal. This was really audacious. And I said, okay, we're going to retain 90% of our staff in a year and 100% of the people who are the most important people to the work that we do. And everybody thought I was just nuts. But what I did was I backed it up with training the managers and leaders who worked on my team, working with them and learning myself how to make sure that we created an environment where people didn't want to leave. And sure enough, 1 year later, we blew those numbers out of the water.
Wow.
Best lesson I've ever had
You
in
blew
how to
those
create an
numbers out of the
environment.
way. You did better than that?
Yep. So we had a 90% target. I think we're 95% at the end of the year of retention and 100% of the people who we had identified that we didn't want to lose. So it was pretty
Wow,
cool. Yeah. In a
that's
very
incredible.
competitive job market, less than a year and a half after we'd had massive layoffs.
How many
So
employees? Team members?
45 on my team. Extended was another 20 or so in other countries that had dotted, matrixed into us. So we had influence over their roles. And
Wow.
it was pretty darn good. And we had lost people up to that point. I mean, I'd lost
What year was this in, more or
I
less?
believe, I want to say it was 2010, 2009-ish, 10-ish,
Okay.
something like that. I
So
think it
you'd
started in
you'd been
2009.
working on this fractional stuff for a long time. Long
Yeah. It
before
was
they called it fractional.
absolutely no question about it. And today, our ability to retain the fractional resources we use in large part are based on those principles that I learned way back then.
Okay. So maybe you know something about the internal gossip here. I got to ask. So PayPal, right? If
Yes.
I look up PayPal founder, because I was like, I'm pretty sure Elon Musk was
Oh,
the
there are tons of
founder
them.
or part of, right? But Google, man, they're hating on Elon or PayPal is. I'm not sure which. Look at
Yeah.
this. You got Peter Thiel, right?
Yep. Peter
Max
Thiel, Max
Levchin,
Levchin. Yep.
and then Ken Howery, Luke. Where the heck is Elon?
It's interesting. I think
You Google
they've
Elon, and it's
largely
like it gives him full credit here, and it's like,
exactly.
what? What's
It,
going on?
it's a good question. I think it's a part of their past they'd rather not talk about. But there are a lot of other
That's
people
why we're
who worked
talking
at
about
PayPal.
it.
I know it's funny. There were people like Reid Hoffman who founded LinkedIn. He came from PayPal.
Oh,
Uh, Last name Jordan. I can't remember. Never met him. He founded OpenTable. So there were lots of really
yep.
well-known PayPal leaders.
Mm.
And you're right; they don't mention some of them, but I think Elon is the one that's more of a lightning rod for a lot of
Are you
people.
saying Chuck Templeton came
No,
from
no.
PayPal?
I said
Oh,
George. I can't remember his
you said from Open Table, so that's. I mean, Chuck Templeton's I was a direct
Jordan.
competitor
I
of
can't
him.
remember his
So
last name was Jordan. I
okay,
can't. He was doing that was when I joined PayPal in 2006. There were 1,000 people who had downloaded the mobile app. Right, that's how early those early days were. And he was one. I think it was Jim Jordan, but I can't remember. I never met him. I just know that he was one of the people who moved on from PayPal to found OpenTable. But some of those early people who worked there, the co-founder of YouTube, also had worked at PayPal.
mm.
There are a lot of examples of people who were there. Though, by the way, that was not in that wave. Just to be clear, I was in the second wave. We
Sure.
were
Well,
the
hey,
yeah, we were the
guilty
wave
by
of people.
association, David.
I know, but we were the. Well, I always have to tell people those were people were brilliant and they set PayPal up for the future, but the company was bleeding cash when I joined. It was just not doing well, and thanks to a lot of people and teams that I had the great fortune to manage, we turned that around. The company became wildly successful. So we're very happy about that.
That's really neat. It is
Yeah,
wildly
yeah,
successful. And it's I've got a terrible analogies in mind. But whether it's the relay race, and people doing different things, or the fact that sometimes it's important to walk, sometimes it's important to run, sometimes it's important to swim.
yeah,
There's even a collaborative effort amongst those who don't necessarily get along or have the same view of how things should be built. So that would be a very fun story to learn more about.
yeah,
That's also why I'm really interested in this Adobe book that you mentioned, or the one about first break all the rules and how much to learn. Because Adobe, I'm honestly not a big fan of their brand these days and
yeah,
their product suite. But I've met a number of founders who came from the Adobe network who've gone on
yeah.
to build some really cool things, and I know they have some enterprise stuff that's amazing. So
Yeah, they
there's so
do.
much to learn from the history of a company like that.
There is, and I'm grateful for the experiences. But you're right; those companies like PayPal and Adobe have a long arc of growth, and sometimes they've done things that you just leave you scratching your head, and then other times they've done some really great things. And but
It's
there are
like they're
some
human,
they're human. That's exactly right. Their cultures, both of them were fabulous places to work when I worked there. I mean, it was just great. I've nothing
That's
but good
awesome.
things to say about having worked there. So,
That's amazing. Put you on the spot in a big way,
yeah.
most important way, in my opinion. And that would be if this is your last opportunity, right? This is the last one, last piece of wisdom, advice you can give us. What powerful lesson can other visionaries learn from your experience?
Just do not stop learning new things. Don't be afraid to learn something new. Doesn't matter if you've been doing the same thing for years or you've just started out in an area. I cannot tell you how many times a conversation, something I've learned just in this conversation with you, some of the things that you have expressed. There's just something about that continuous learning that keeps you fresh, keeps you aware of changes, and then what's great as in my case, as I get older, I start to be able to tie things together from my experiences, and you can see all these interesting connecting points that you don't always see
Yeah,
up front. So yeah, just keep learning. That's all you can do to make yourself and your teams better at what they do.
I love that. I love that. There are always new perspectives. I have a very childlike demeanor. I'm not. I can be childish too. I won't lie. And part of that is because I've got little kids. But it's really that curiosity, that appreciation for knowing that, okay, like as a child, you can hide something on the other side of the table. And if the child's young enough, they'll be like, and you bring it back up, they're like, oh, how did that happen? And then you learn to go around the table like, oh, cool. I can access that now. And we are no different as human beings. So I really like this quote. I'm going to pull it up here while we talk about it. Um, One of my favorite quotes is anonymous. Please don't give me credit for it. Anybody listening in. It is, the more you learn, the more you can learn.
I
And that
love that.
process of like, wow, every time we learn something new, it opens a door to so many more things that we can learn. And Strengths Finder, 2.0 did give me at least when I took the assessment, my number one strength is as a learner. Right. So I love exactly
That's
what you said.
great.
And I learned through people, interactions with people. Right. So it's a wonderful thing for me. And if visionaries are listening in, you know, this would be an interesting audience to see somebody say like, I'm done learning. I think
Yeah.
that's kind of the nature of being a visionary
Yeah.
is you are trying to learn and improve what you're doing and continue to move. So let's move this conversation into the title of what we're going to talk about, maximizing worldwide expertise at the fraction of the cost. I know I coined the title without really directly talking to you about it, but
Okay.
so I'll give a little frame of reference. To me, maximizing worldwide expertise is about learning to work with others who are out there. And that takes so many shapes and forms. I'm going to plant some seeds. That could be VAs in a foreign country. That could be strategic partners, vendors. That could be people that you want to consider your competitor when in reality they could be your best ally.
That's right.
That could be business partnerships and growth. There's so many ways to go about that, and at a fraction of the cost. So I'm going to put you on a huge spot here. How do you maximize worldwide expertise and those relationships while limiting costs without going about in a way where you stranglehold the individuals you're working with or oppress the people who are supporting your vision? Where's the harmony and healthy balance of that? How
That
do we
is
achieve?
a really important question, Jackson. Thanks. And thanks for the lead into it, because I believe that sets us up really nicely. So we are the beneficiaries at Fidecio, my company, and our team, of two trends that are occurring in the world and have for a while, but really accelerated with COVID. On the one hand, you had people who were, once COVID hit, all of a sudden a large number of tech workers had to work in their homes remotely, right? And well, what did that do? So it did a few things. It made people realize, well, gosh, this isn't so bad. Now, some people got isolated and they struggled, and we know that it didn't help necessarily everyone's mental health. However, what happened over time, it was people started to realize, gosh, I could live in another place and I don't need to make this much money and work this hard. And yet I could still have a good life. And life is really important to me. And so this dynamic of people wanting to work part-time or fractionally sort of plays into our hands. We don't have to convince anybody to do it. There are a lot of people who have
Mhm.
situations where they've got a spouse who works, or they have a situation where maybe they're taking care of a parent, whatever it is. They don't wind up in a situation where as good as this, because COVID accelerated it. So we've got this wonderful
Yes.
pool of resources we didn't have before. Match that up with this demographic reality, not just in the United States, but in many Western countries, and even more in Asia at this point, other than India, where the birth rates have been so low that now, over the course of the last 30 years, now there are these huge number of open jobs that cannot be filled. So I'll pick one as an example. Information security. Try to get a cybersecurity analyst in a company as an employee or full time, or a leader of information security, you may not think it's important until you've been hacked. Um,
Right.
it's almost impossible to find these, and they're so expensive. But
Hmm.
there are many people out there who have this expertise, who only want to work a few hours a week or a few hours a month, and they can accomplish a lot because they're focused on this particular task. They're not distracted by everything you'd get working, a full time. And many people like to have the flexibility of, hey, I'm going to do a little bit. I'm going to work this month and next month this much, and then I'm going to take off a few weeks. So these dynamics have helped us. So we find ourselves just really the beneficiaries of a couple of trends. And now, how
Absolutely.
do we make it work where because we could be in a situation where we didn't retain these people. They just worked with us in our network, and then they went off because they didn't like working with us. But that's the prior conversation. How do we create an environment where people want to work, treat them very well, talk to them all the time, support them, make sure the clients are happy. Don't let them just sit out there and, blow in the wind when something goes wrong. Go in there and help them. Uh, it's just been a very interesting convergence of events. So we're very lucky in many
It
ways.
is lucky, blessed, prepared. I think there's a couple of formulas that exist there. One, again, you've worked in these companies where you had remote teams.
Right.
People that you know what that's like. I've been working from home since 2010, and so way before COVID hit, we were running startups using Zoom calls. Getting comfortable with video power as well. And when COVID hit, we got crushed for one company, and
Mm.
my eyes lit up like fireworks for another. Right. So we were competing against Open Table with Restaurant Connect.
Wow. Look at that.
And next thing you know, all the restaurants on the East Coast get shut down. $15,000 in monthly recurring revenue is gone in one day. Right. 2 weeks later, a week and a half later, all the Pacific Coast gets shut down. Another $20,000 gone overnight. Like we didn't have the ability to take that hit as a startup, and so that startup of 15 years, right? And
Wow.
at the same time, running my digital agency, it was, there's a part of me going like, oh my gosh, finally, the world's finally going to get it that you can work
Yes.
remotely. The
Yeah.
world's finally going to start moving towards that. And you and I, through years of experience with that, where others had kind of shunned it, they're going through some repercussions right now that are still mounting in terms of how do you build a virtual culture, and how do you make sure that people want to belong to that. They're not just trying it for now, or
Right.
catching the best of the flavor and then moving on to the next one because companies don't know how to sustain that type of environment. We went through serious growing pains for how to figure that out as startups. And every year taught us new lessons in terms of, oh, this is what happens after 4 years of people working remotely together, and the emotions people feel. And we better start fixing that and changing it. So you've been through that on a scale that's far, far larger and with far more people than I ever have. So I see that as a massive benefit. And again, the reality that I don't think it was just luck. I think you were far more prepared than maybe you even realize.
I think I'm grateful to the people who I learned from. I had a wonderful leaders I worked for years, not just at PayPal and Adobe, but in other places. And, you have good leaders and bad leaders, but you learn things from each one of them. And I just feel as though and you said it, blessed. I'm very grateful for those experiences. I'm really grateful for the people who gave me a chance at doing things when I didn't necessarily look like or sound like the right person,
Hmm.
because I grew into things. Also, I wasn't, we're not all born. Well, you weren't born, at 5 years old to do this today. Maybe you were,
Yeah.
but I certainly wasn't. And so, that's all about the learning piece. And I think you said it very, very appropriately. We just have great people, and we work hard to keep them as excited and engaged as we can, and supported, and that seems to be enough to have them keep coming back to us and saying, I didn't work last month with you guys, but I really like working with you. And can't tell how many people we've gotten who have had bad experiences working for not great leaders, and that saddens me.
Yeah.
That really does.
Let's dive in hard, fast, and heavy too, if we
Sure,
can, into
go for it.
this topic of fraction of the cost.
Yes.
How? How does
How?
that work?
Okay. Yeah. So here's what we do. So first of all, we know that if you wanted to, let's use an example. Let's say you wanted to go hire an information security analyst or a chief information security officer. And I'll use both of them. They're well into the 6 digits. Obviously, the chief information security officer, salary wise, right? They're off the charts. So just by virtue of, and now they can't find people. So this is the other problem, right? You might get somebody, they won't stay around very long because then someone else will just offer them more money or, whatever. At a certain point, they'll go. The other part of this is information security is not considered. It's not as though you were brought in to grow the company, right? You're brought in to protect the company, and it's not I wouldn't say it's a thankless job, but it's a very different kind of job from, say, someone in marketing or someone in product.
Right. It's not a revenue producing.
Yeah, you're not building anything exactly, so it's challenging. So how do you do that? Well, what you do is you talk to clients, and they say things like, "I just can't get anybody to fill this role," or, "Can you help me find somebody?" And that usually leads to, "Well, you have 0. So now if you have 20%, you're going to be better off. By the way, it could probably get you to 40% of work because these people who are fractional are highly dedicated and experts. So they don't need a whole lot of ramp up time." So just by virtue of that cost differential, they're saving a substantial amount of money, and they're still getting the core things done. And this goes back, Jackson, to the focus piece, because someone might say to us, "Oh, our information security environment is a disaster." Okay. What are the 3 things that you can do to make that better right now? You don't need someone full time to do that. And so that's the part where we start to make the case. I'll give you the example I started with real quickly. That healthcare company could not get a new product out the door digitally because they had no idea what they were doing. So what did we say? Well, you never got anything out the door successfully. We're going to give you a team of 5 people, let them work for a year. We'll get something out the door. We did on time. And by the way, I'm not taking anything away from the employees, because you had said something earlier. They were thrilled because they knew that the success of their company was contingent upon some digital offerings that were successful. So what we did was we tied that together to, hey, we're going to show you the statements of work inside the company that these people are, we're going to show you what they're doing. Because that's the other thing, is if you outsource something, it's kind of a mystery as to what they're doing to the rest of the people in the company. And my belief is if you're more transparent, we're in a situation where people go, "Oh, okay, well, oh yeah, no one here can do that. That's great. Let's have them do it." And that starts to create a dynamic that's more of a partnership and less of I'm looking at them skeptically, like, are they going to take my job, or, what's going to happen? So it's a delicate dance, but we're really
David, this is so important. This is so important for business owners and visionaries to get. I want to break this down. I know we're over time. Do you? And I don't want to pressure you if you have a meeting coming up. So be respectful of
but it's not a problem. We can keep going. Just keep going.
We got extra 5 minutes.
Yep.
We're going to take 5 minutes after to recap. So
that's fine. I have till the quarter of the hour, so we're good.
This is so big for entrepreneurs. So one, you talked about Pareto's principle, right? The 80-20 rule. Whether you meant to or not, that's exactly what it can go from 0 to, instead of trying to do the 100% that we want to do. We always imagine, oh my gosh, we have to get all of this done. Right. When in reality, if we just skip to, we don't have to let go of the 80% now. We're getting the 20% that's there. But because you're working with an expert in that craft, again, they can usually surprise you and build more than what was requested, because we also didn't just shove all of this dirty laundry workload on them that didn't make sense, isn't planned out, isn't actually something that, it's more of a scary boogeyman monster than it is an actual problem. So that's a brilliant way to preemptively put the Pareto's principle into effect. I hadn't thought about it that way. Now I'm going to give you one more, and those for the visionaries that are out there too. It has come to my attention recently, the analogy that as business owners, I guess I'll throw myself under the boat, but I feel so removed because I've been doing this for 14 years, but we are awful at shopping responsibly. What I mean by that is you can go into a store and you know exactly how much you're supposed to pay for toilet paper. You know how much you're supposed to pay for an avocado. you know how much you're supposed to pay for gasoline. I don't know anybody who doesn't know what their gas prices are, right? Like very few people don't see that gas price. And you know how to shop and compare even when you buy a house and something as big as that. But in the business world, we don't know how to shop, and we don't know how to compare values and look at things from an open perspective. I see too many business owners that are going about that blind, and I'm saying, like, stop, like, shop what I do, shop what David does. Go out there and do your competitor research and see what's out there with a healthy mindset, not saying, oh, I see somebody who claims to do this for free, on or do this on Fiverr. Like, you can't compare the apples and the oranges and get the same types of results either. You know, there's so much that could be learned about in that regard. And here's what I mean by that in terms of how can you apply this for yourself as making sure that you are getting services at a fraction of the cost. I'll give one example. At First Class Business, we believe in a pay what you can model. That terrifies business owners.
Yeah.
They think, oh my gosh, like, well, what if I'm overpaying? Well, if you're worried about overpaying, go do your market research. Just go look and see, or ask us directly, like, how much does the design, how much does what do they call that? The branding guide cost?
Right.
It doesn't actually have a cost to it.
Yeah, exactly.
My costs on my branding guides, maybe a grand total of $60 to get a branding guide done.
Wow.
Yeah. And so I've had clients who've come on board, they go and buy that without telling us, even though they know the full scope of work for what we do is insane. And they spend $3,500 on a branding guide. And I'm like, if you just talk to us, like, one, you'd be happy with it, and you're not happy with it. Right. Two, you wouldn't have even had to pay for it, because we're working on profitability for your company. And that's how we drive the success of our clients, and how we drive the reinvestments with us is what we're doing leading to profits, because we happen to play in that ballpark and mechanism. Yeah. So if you're trying to assess who you should work with as a brand out there, visionaries, and again, it goes back to your quote. Let me go back to your quote here, because your quote said it really, really well. You said, don't be afraid to learn, right? Don't be afraid to learn the new things. Ask the tough questions. Ask the uncomfortable questions of the leaders you want to work with, because if they can't handle that, they're not a great leader, for one. Yeah. Go ahead. You got a thought on that.
No, that's awesome, Jackson. You actually hit the nail on the head. I'm going to go back to that town hall bad leadership experience, because one of the things I learned from that experience was, it's not something that might be obvious. And that was that I also wished that people on my team had asked questions of the person who was taking credit for stuff. And that got me to a place where, when I conduct meetings or I have conversations with people, I will tell them up front, I want to know exactly what you're thinking. The most controversial question you have that you might be afraid to ask, because either you don't think I can answer it, or you are very skeptical of the entire discussion. And I love that. And I like that in town hall settings too. I even say that.
Yes.
Look, you're all thinking the same thing. If you don't ask the question, I'm going to ask it, and then I'll answer it, and we'll have a discussion about it. Because we have a tendency, I believe, to hold back. Business owners do this all the time, right? There can be a lot of reasons for that, but you articulated it really well. Ask those tough questions. Don't let people get away without asking the difficult questions. And I like being put on the spot. And if I can't deliver something, I will tell you.
Yeah. And that's the definition of an expert. That's what Matt Cutts, the search director of Google, taught us when I was at OnLocal. That an expert is a person who, they don't know everything. They're the person who will go get the answer, though. And that's, they know their limitations. They're not the God of all wisdom. So, David, this has been awesome. It's hard not to call you the God of all wisdom with how much you've taught us today. So I'm sure you have your flaws and shortcomings too, but we saw a lot of wisdom and depth today. Those of you who are listening in, on the landing page, we will have a section below that says action steps. And you can, of course, click on those links down there to see how to connect with David based on the different offerings that he has available. In addition, there's one more call to action I want to draw to your attention. It's in the top right corner. It says, be our guest. If you have a vision that matters, you want to get on stage and talk to people about what you're up to in the world and what you're building, then don't hesitate to apply and meet with us. We would love to see your vision, as long as it's holistic, as long as you're striving to be a great leader to others. And, it doesn't matter if you are Peter Thiel, or Elon Musk battling out over the past PayPal story, or you're Peter Jones and nobody knows who you are. I still want you on this stage. Right. And Peter Thiel, we'd love to have you too. So David, thanks for being here today, and everybody have an excellent rest of your day. Thanks for allowing us to go over, and we'll see you on the next episode.
Thank you, Jackson.
Thank you for being here today. I'm really happy that you tuned in to Vision Pros Live. I'm looking forward to seeing your reactions as these episodes continue to move forward. This is going to get more and more fun. We'll have more and more engagement as well. We'll invite people to participate in the show. And thank you for giving us your time and attention.